Hi, and welcome to another episode of Con Las Comadres. My name is Jen.
I'm Karina.
I'm Edna.
And we're super excited to be doing our first video hangout, quarantine edition. We are a transnational feminist multimedia platform centering the resiliency and creativity of women of color. We have a super special guest who we've been wanting to collaborate with, and we have collaborated in the past, but in terms of an episode, we've been wanting to talk with her for a while. We have Gata Salvaje. Jennifer, you want to talk more about our lovely guest?
Gata Salvaje is founder and creator of a queer angry feminist hand silk screened merchandise brand, Gata Salvaje.
Gata Salvaje has also been an organizer for tenants' rights, youth organizing, and has her own tax prep business. And we'll get into all of these facets as the conversation goes on. This is our first kind of video hangout, as I mentioned before. And I think the reason we wanted to invite Gata, especially in these times, is because tomorrow, April 1st, is what LA and I'm sure many cities across the United States are calling for a renter strike. And I know Gata has been super active in not just posting about it, but giving people information on their rights, especially considering her background. And it's also her birthday because she's our favorite Aries. Woo-hoo! Badass, right? Brilliant energy. And so why don't we just go ahead and dive in and tell us a little bit about your tenants' rights organizing background. Like, when did you start working with that?
Yeah, so I started working with Coalition for Economic Survival about 2 years ago, and I was there for about a year. And so I was kind of like community engagement. I did a lot of like community engagement with them. And also there was a program, or there is a program called REAP, the Rent Escrow Account Program, where if you tell the city, hey, there's issues, there needs to be a lot of repairs in my apartment, or an inspector notices like, oh, hey, there's issues here, and the landlord doesn't fix it during a certain amount of time, then this REAP program allows for tenants to pay a rent reduction until everything is fixed back to normal. And so they wouldn't even be paying their rent to the landlord, they'd be paying it to the city. So pretty much my job was to go in, tell the tenant, hey, I don't know if you noticed all these letters, but you do have a 50% rent discount right now. And then it was just very much kind of talking to them to pay into the city. So that was my main organizing. That's where I got a lot of experience. And I saw a lot of like the very like on the ground gentrification happening in South Central, in Highland Park, Koreatown, and I've seen everything landlords can get rid of. I've seen the worst. Like, I feel like I've seen the worst of the worst, and I know what like really trash ass landlords are capable of, and that's why I don't really trust them.
Yeah.
And a raíz de eso, I was learning all this stuff, and so I did also the Boso, which y'all can even look up on Instagram right now, also the Boso.
That's how I found out about you, actually.
That's right. That's right. And so it was a bilingual telenovela, Instagram telenovela, where people, like, I was explaining in Spanish and in English. It was this also bear who was like the slumlord, and he's trying to tell me this, and I'm like, mira, señor oso, la ley dice que blah, 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 so I had started it in English, then people were like, no, I want to show this to my mom. Okay, cool, I'll do it in Spanish. But after I left my job at Coalition for Economic Survival after a year, it's just I was busy with other things, and I didn't really have the inspiration of like every day that contact that I had with the tenant organizing before. So I don't even know the password or what email I used for that account. So I don't know.
Also went away. You're currently a renter, right? And I think you've been very public with the many like problems you've had with your landlord, and you even have a whole thing about landlords are trash. Do you want to explain a little bit behind that and what your experience has been and kind of what you're facing now, this economic instability that this virus epidemic has caused, and what that means for renters?
Yeah. Um, so landlords are trash, right? Comes very much from, of course, men are trash, all this whole trash movement, I guess, right? Really what it's meant to highlight is inequality, and understanding power dynamics throughout different intersections. That's what the whole calling trash is about. It's very much validating and honoring the rage of those who get the worst of it, and understanding that power dynamic again, right? I think it's important for all of us to understand that, men are trash doesn't exist just by itself. It's white men, it's cis men, it's straight men, it's like capitalism, like all of these things, capitalism, sexism, homophobia, white supremacy, all of those things go hand in hand together. And I think it's important to have these really like critical to be really good critical thinkers, I guess, and really challenge ourselves when we're okay with saying men are trash, but we don't feel comfortable saying landlords are trash or something. You get me? Um, so what's happening right now with LA and California, it's really sad, but I'm not surprised because elected officials are trash. That is my next shirt coming out. I'm actually printing it this Friday. So they've really let us down. It's interesting the messaging of like, oh, rent freeze, moratorium, and you know, my partner was telling me that their friend said, "Hey, I heard there's a rent forgiveness in LA. Do you qualify for that?" And I'm like, look.
Let's get the record straight.
Yeah, it's not. That's the messaging they want it to seem like. Oh, hey, look, they're really helping us when they didn't, and they really just gave us crumbs. So how it works right now. So let me explain the process, the eviction process. You either don't, let's say you don't pay your rent for XYZ reason. You get a 3-day notice. You're supposed to get a 3-day notice from your landlord saying, hey, you did not pay your rent. You have 3 days to pay, or I'm going to file an unlawful detainer. 3 days pass, they file the unlawful detainer. Then you get like a copy kind of the unlawful detainer sent to your house. Not an unlawful detainer, it's I forget the exact word for it, I'm sorry, y'all. But you have to give a response. You have to reply and say, hey, no, this, I want to, you typically you need to find a lawyer to help you with that stuff, in responding to the unlawful detainer. Then you wait for your day in court. Then you show up to court, preferably with a lawyer. You say your case. Look, I wasn't able to pay the rent because of XYZ reason. The judge then decides, okay, that's valid. You can stay. Here's this agreement, but you can stay. Or, no, that's not a good reason. I'm letting the landlord evict you. Caso cerrado. And when that happens, when it's like, okay, caso cerrado, they give you, I don't know if they give you, it depends on what happens in court, but they'll say, okay, you have 10 days to leave, you have a month to leave, whatever it is. Then the sheriff shows up and locks you out, pretty much says like, no, we're le ponen un candado, lo que sea, right? And they lock you out. So the only difference that has happened in that process is if you go to court, or if the landlord takes you to court, you could say, oh, well, because I was impacted by COVID-19, that's why I couldn't pay the rent. It could be either you were sick yourself or you lost your job because of COVID-19. Pretty much it's a reason, you can use that reason in court. But it's still really up to the judge to be like, okay, that's valid or not. And what sucks about that is they're not stopping it at the beginning. If we had like a rent freeze or a complete moratorium freeze, then it just ends there, right? Like, oh, I didn't pay my rent, it ends there. With this system that they have, it's like, oh, you still have to go to court, you still have to scramble to find a lawyer. What do I say? What like, and there's a lot of people that really don't know their rights, whether it be like a language barrier, whether it be for anything, right? And of course there's tons of help, but sometimes people aren't able to find it or think that it doesn't even exist. So then all of that happens. As of right now as well, like for the lockouts, that's done. Like they're not doing lockouts till further notice. if you were kind of in the process of getting evicted, like right now, or before, I think the courts are closed. I'm understanding that the courts are closed, and they really can't do much. What else? I'm trying to remember because it's like a whole bunch of other info.
One,
I have a question regarding the rent freeze, Gata, because I know I'm living in the university apartments at UCLA. You see trash, you know. And a lot of the concerns are, well, people gonna get the rent freeze, but then in a few months they're gonna have a massive debt because the rent here is it's crazy. If I get the rent freeze for 2 months, I'm gonna have a debt over $3,000 on top of my next rent payment. So I think that's a lot of the conversation that we've been having here, because we're trying to also participate in a rent strike, the students, like mostly most of the students living here are grad students, so they lose their jobs, we lose our jobs because it was through the institution. So how that look for, I know you are used to work with communities of color, with undocumented folks, so it's the most vulnerable community in terms of economic insecurity. So how that will look, the rent freeze?
How would a rent freeze look like if they passed it?
Yeah.
Or even the difference between a rent freeze and a moratorium, because I know, like, I don't even know what the difference is and how.
So that's what they're saying. They're saying a moratorium, but it's not a moratorium. It's kind of like, like the Patriot Act, but really it's just taking away all of our rights of like privacy. It's like the same kind of way of thought, where they're saying, oh, this is a moratorium we're doing, but it's not. Literally all it is if you go to court, if it gets to the point where it escalates to court, you can say COVID-19 was the reason why I wasn't able to pay my rent, and you have to give proof. And this sucks for a lot of us who have cash income, like myself. Like, I have a lot of stuff that's under the table. I have like my merch stuff. I mean, I don't know if a judge will believe, like, oh, here's an email from, these 3 events that canceled on me, this month, and that made a huge difference. Like, I don't know. All of that is up in the air. A rent freeze, like, if they legit just like closed the courts and said like, no, like, they could do so much to protect us, like banning all evictions. So as of right now, all evictions are not banned. If you don't pay your rent, like that type, because of COVID-19, like that's one thing, right? Like I mentioned, you can use that argument in court. But if the owner wants to move into your unit, if the owner wants to Ellis Act evict, they can still do that right now. But again, remembering the process of eviction, the sheriff isn't coming by right now to lock people out. But as soon as everything is lifted and we're out of the pandemic, whatever that looks like, then they're gonna switch it up, and we don't know what that looks like.
Yeah,
But
actually, oh no, go ahead.
I think the best thing to do is to just really, get with your local tenants union. I joined the LA Tenants Union not too long ago, and like they have like monthly meetings, or they have like meetings within like neighborhoods, and I think there's a lot more information there. They have tons and tons of resources, so I'd highly recommend actually going there first before anything.
Yeah, something similar actually had passed in Long Beach too, which was titled the eviction moratorium as well. But yet again, like, even the folks down there also knew that like there were loopholes for that too, like the need to provide proof, for one, of like how COVID like in 19 impacts like your inability to pay rent. And over there in Long Beach, like the housing crisis is real. Like, fucking property owners are vicious. Like, and it's not just like slumlords, it's corporate landlords who evict entire buildings. Folks, water, what's his name, corporate star, I don't remember the name of the corporation, but like that one, this one corporation tried to stop all the water in one of their buildings during like a couple months ago, and it was just crazy. It's like that's the kind of like acts they pull on tenants down there. So like this still like it's not what we need at this point. Like right now we're going with folks who are filing for unemployment in the 3+ millions. Like
Yeah.
that's way high. Like you can't expect people to pay rent if you have no income. So the logical reasoning would be to just stop like paying rent, to just have a like complete like stopping on that and no evictions. But that's not their reasoning. Their reasoning is always to protect property owners.
Yeah. And that again plays into capitalism, white supremacy, because who are the ones being left out, right? It's mostly people of color, like thinking like even the idea of everyone needs to be a shelter in place. Not all of us have an apartment or a home to go to, right? So that also doesn't make sense either. Um,
Most of us live
Pretty
with
much,
roommates.
huh?
Most of us live in like full houses. Like
Yeah.
it's not possible at this moment to really be safe at home, like they would say.
Yeah. And really, this moratorium, it's really just saying you can't get evicted right now, but in 3 months, you might. And you
And
can,
all your rent accumulated.
yes, and all of that. Um, if you can work something out with your landlord, like if you want to, like, pay the rent or pay it partially or pay it whatever, it is important to get it on paper. A lot of folks, especially from the community, are very used to like, oh, well, he told me this or she told me that. And it's just very, very important. Everything, no matter what is decided, has to be put on paper. Um, More regarding, like, I don't know if, like, if they say, oh, we're going to charge you interest or something, I don't know if that's allowed or not, to be honest. That I would say hit up your local tenants union to figure out the details with that.
Yeah, because you can't trust landlords, and they could say one thing one day, like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna fix this," or "Oh yeah, we'll work it out later." Then the next day, nothing. And I know you were actively watching like the LA City Council meetings when they were supposed to vote on all this, and then it was delayed. There's a lot of back and forth, and I read something on Instagram that said 8 of LA's 15 city council reps are actually landlords, and that's why they blocked the ban. And so when you're talking about how politicians are trash and landlords are trash, oftentimes those two correlate. It's also like who is owning these big properties, and there's a lot of properties in LA that are empty, that are like real estate developments. Like I remember I used to work in Little Tokyo, and they pushed out a lot of elderly folks to build these like high rises because they want to make it look like downtown LA is like this really up and coming city, and $3,000 rents for like a 1 or 2 bedroom, and they sit there empty. And even with what's happening in El Sereno with the Caltrans home, over 163 homes empty. And then you really start to think, like you were saying, all this is kind of showing how these institutions, these people are trash. One way of putting in how they're all corrupt and how it's all interrelated. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
it's so,
sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's, go ahead, actually.
No. I just want to tap on that. That if we really look deeply on what's the issue, it's all correlated to the way that the city is developed and the way that the city is working along with landlords and compañías like Blackstone, for example. And not only that, a lot of people tend to think, because United States, so it's all about meritocracy, that homeless population is there because they have
Drug addiction.
drug addiction, they suffer from problems with their mental health. But if you really, really pay attention to the numbers and talk with the people living on the street, it's because they lost their houses because they've been evicted and they couldn't pass the period of 6 months that allowed them to resettle in a house. And not only that, the same people that is voting against moratoriums or rent freeze is the same people that is pushing to develop the city in a way that is unfriendly to the people that lose their houses. There's a lot of criminalization about parking on the street and sleep there. There's a lot of criminalization for the people that sleep near parks or near centers of recreation because they don't want people close to spaces that they can take a shower, they can access to clean water, and you can even park and sleep near a school because they try to criminalize and prevent like single parents to keep their kids going to school. And all of these things are related to the same topic. So I think for me, it is important to contextualize the issue that, okay, yes, rent freeze and all this issue that is happening for us, that we have the privilege to live in an apartment and rent, and how this is like extremely related to people living on the street. And we are not far, like we are so vulnerable to be in that space. So I think it is important for me also to think, okay, let's fight for the rights of tenants, blah, 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 but let's also move together with protecting the people that is living on the street.
Yeah, on house folks. And then also, even if we think about how this system is structured, it's always prioritizing the right to private property, and how even in the beginning, like, you know, everyone wants to, oh, the Constitution, and they like jerk off to like, oh, the founders and all that stuff. Literally, it was structured so you didn't have no rights unless you had property. And how does that look in modern times? Very little.
It looks like this.
Exactly. And the fact that even to own property, it's like most of the people who own property is because of generational wealth and how they've been able to accumulate, and they've inherited this property. Or if you're like, if it's just like your abuelita, which a lot of people are getting bought out because they can't maintain the cost of owning property and all that stuff. It's like, it's not accessible. And so more and more people become renters because you can't buy. And then where do they get pushed out? As, okay, now you have this new like rising class of like technocrats and millennials with like new wealth or whatever that are buying out these neighborhoods. Like, even if we're just focusing on LA, these neighborhoods that were used to be considered low income neighborhoods, and now they're like trendy. And this whole thing with gentrification. And so it's definitely layers upon layers that are being exacerbated by the current crises. And even before Corona, there was already a housing crisis. There was already an economic crisis. The gap between the wealthy 1% and the 99 was widening. And I think that I really hope that people are using the time that they're in home to educate how they can help each other, their community, to survive, because this is not going to go away by itself. And this whole idea of returning to normal, like, what is normal anyway? Where people are oppressed, where the majority of us are marginalized and are looked at as disposable. Like, dude, literally, this president is saying y'all are disposable.
Yes.
If it wasn't
He said go back to work because work matter more than you.
Yep.
Exactly.
Y'all need to give yourselves up for capitalism in the name of capitalism.
Fuck that shit.
But that's the thing, we're not fucking machines. Like, we can't be expected to operate as if normal. We're not under normal conditions. Our shit has changed dramatically because of this fucking thing. And that's the thing. It didn't come out of, like, the system. The system wasn't prepared to deal with it. This is the shit that happens because motherfucking nature, like.
And not only that, how many things were normalized under those conditions? Like,
right, like for example, this idea of you have to isolate yourself in the city. For example, there's a lot of fencing, there's a lot of racial banishment, and that's before Corona. And I think we need to really realize that these issues are just intensified right now. It doesn't mean that these issues didn't exist before. Like, for example, the fact that people is like getting all that they can from supermarkets and leave people with no resources, so they live day by day without accessibility to like basic needs. It's just showing like a way that American society works, because it is about that. It is about self-quarantine. It is about protect yourself. It is about working as an individual and not as a community. And I think the only way that we can overcome this kind of crisis is collectively, but it's been extremely difficult to organize, especially in a momentum that is full of fear, panic, and a lot of people is trying to survive a solas.
Yeah.
And also the way that the measurements are being labeled on the media, like social isolation, it shouldn't be labeled like that, because you shouldn't be isolate yourself from society. You should keep working on society. You should isolate yourself, physically, but it doesn't mean that you're by your own. You need to like matar para todo el mundo para que tú estés vivo.
and I really hope that this is like a big wake up call to folks. And, you know, I think there's this big thing where people think that they're closer to being rich than they are to being homeless or houseless. You get me? Like, where there's, and I'm just like, hold up, you a peasant like me.
Yeah.
Like, calm down.
That's right.
I talk about this in my tax workshop. Any of us making under 200K, we are peasants. And I know it sounds ridiculous, because I know for us, someone making 100K, you're like, what the fuck?
I wish. Yeah.
That's a considerable, that's a lot of money, right? But when we think, oh my God, y'all, I saw this video on Instagram. They said they had 1 grain of rice represent
Oh, I saw it.
$100,000, right? 1 little grain of rice represents $100,000. Jeff Bezos has 58 pounds of rice. And I have barely a third of 1 little piece of rice.
I have
And
like
I'm like,
finger
why?
shavings.
Yeah.
And I'm
like scavenging, like, fuck.
Fucking polvito. Like, it's nothing. We don't own shit, y'all. Like,
we don't. And I think it's also a cultural change and a shift, because with classism, you know how like with misogyny is the hatred of women, but also we learn how to hate ourselves, and it was my fault and I shouldn't have worn that. Like, we see that also play out with classism, right? Well, this is your fault because why didn't you have a savings? Well, this is your fault because why were you at that job? Why did you take, like, there are people saying this shit and I'm like, what? Hold up.
Ooh.
This whole thing had nothing to do with me. Yo,
Exactly.
I was working. We were all doing our shit. We're here surviving like we always have. The rich, fucking Trump, did not take any precautions. Fucking disbanded. What is it? He didn't.
EPA restrictions.
CDC? Was it the CDC? And then this happened, and now I lose my job because of Donald Trump. I didn't do anything. This is not my fault.
We're
And
still going to work. The fuck?
Exactly. And we're still going to work, and we still have to pay for it. It's like, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's overwhelming. And but speaking of that, I would love to do a check-in, because I know we definitely just jumped in to the conversation. And I know it's been overwhelming. A lot of us have been adapting, just kind of like pulling things out of the air, resources, helping each other out. But how are you processing this time? How are you finding people taking care of themselves? How are you taking care of themselves? And how are you taking care of those in your community, so people can get ideas and and really come together, even if it's like on this format online? Because this can be overwhelming. All of this can be super overwhelming. And like a lot of people are starting to acknowledge, and how we started this conversation, it's okay to feel what you feel, whether it's discouraged, depressed, whether you're finding it hard to be productive. Like, people have this assumption because you have so much time that you have to overproduce, and like not everybody's in that space.
Yeah, you know, I was reading this article on Facebook that they were saying, like, you know, if you feel like you're really hungry, if you feel like you're getting depressed because of everything, like, this is how our body responds to trauma. And everything we're kind of going through, like, for all of us, we've gone through a significant shift somewhere in our routine or how we go about our usual lives. This is a very big shift. And it's important to very much be in those feelings, validate that, and just kind of like go with the flow is the best way. Like, you know, the week of the 13th, I think leading up to Friday the 13th, I think I was panicking the whole week. I had a headache for a good week and a half. And I was coughing and all this because I was very, very much in panic. And of course, when we are in panic and we're scared, that lowers our immune system. And then with, oh, I coughed, maybe I have coronavirus, like even more hysteria, right? It's very much like, for me, I've learned to like, okay, I'm freaking out right now. Okay, let me think all that out. Okay, but it is also important to recognize that we do have privileges as well, as either family who help us, or the fact that we're young and we're not, you know, like, we can probably get through being sick. Some of us, not all of us, of course. Like, we just have different privileges.
Or we work at home.
You know, yeah. And I just remind myself of that. And I think another way of self-care is, of course, doing like Zoom calls. I've been doing like virtual smoke sesh with like some friends. And we do, it's like every 3 days, I think. Yeah, every 3 days we've been doing that. And we just smoke, we check in, we talk about just anything else that doesn't relate to coronavirus, because there's that. I think it's also important to take a minute to just go outside and take a walk, like go around the block, breathe, make sure you're drinking enough water. Like those little things I think are really, really important.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about, I'm very privileged to live close to the beach, and how it feels so good to feel that breeze. But not there's some people who live in neighborhoods. Like I was driving, I think in South Central earlier today, and literally like they have these scrawny little trees every couple of blocks, and you can really see how the city has been designed to like not really give green spaces, and but it's still important to walk around and
The redlining, yeah.
yeah, to breathe in that fresh air and to get some sun and just ground yourself. Even if there's cement, you're still on top of earth, you know, and it's possible to ground yourself and do whatever type of breathing exercises or whatever works for folks. Because I mean, I don't know if people are thinking this is gonna resolve itself in the next month, but I really doubt it.
I think they say the peak is gonna happen in May, right? So probably by June, July, and I even heard August is when shit will relatively be back to normal, or whatever that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and it's a linear. It's gonna look different in different countries. So it's gonna be a process. Like maybe in some countries we see things are getting better, but that doesn't mean that we get to the peak here. We need to wait. Other countries look different. So yeah, we really need to be gentle about that, and also to respect people emotions, people feelings. And I think this is the time to have empathy for people in our communities, because everybody's dealing with this differently,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody has different kind of responsibilities. So I think that's super important right now. And be nice with the people that is fucking working in the fucking street, cleaning the streets for you. Be nice with the people that it's in the supermarket. Be nice with the people that is taking your fucking phone call if you are having issues with your internet.
Tip
Be
all your
nice with
drivers, your
them.
delivery folks.
Yes.
Tip your drivers. Yeah. If you need to take an Uber, just wear a fucking mask, wear something. Don't put the people in risk. You can carry the thing. I feel a lot of young people, not only here but in other countries, they're like, oh, it's nothing, I don't have anything. So let's just be responsible, not because we feel safe, but because the people around us, maybe we have a close friend who is young, and maybe they have they're carrying a disease, but they don't want to share that, and it's not their obligation to tell that to you. Just be gentle with everybody, because you don't know what people is going on.
And you could be asymptomatic and still have corona, because it could take a week or two. So like with the whole tapabocas, like it's, you have to pretend that other people have it or you have it. And that's the best way to like approach things, right?
Yeah, actually, another thing I also wanted to input too, as much as we talk about this, yeah, there's concern about like what we can do our part individually to respond to this, but also just remembering the fact that we wouldn't have to be put in a position where we have to take an individual response to this. Like it shouldn't ever have to get to that point if we had already a system that was already in place that would have prevented this in the first place. Like, you know, we talk about like, what if COVID keeps going on for like, you know, X amount of months, right? Let's fucking prepare for that. Like, how do we combat this? And also not just talk about COVID getting bigger, but like what can we do to also just find solutions? I think now more than ever, what grounds me is organizing, because if you just take it, then like it's o sea, vivir y resistir, like to be able to respond with not react, respond with actual help. Like I know we hear talks about mutual aid circles happening. I know that some are happening in Long Beach and there's some that are happening in LA. Like, you know, for me, it's also like, how do we activate people during this time? Like, what are you really gonna do? Go outside?
Yeah.
Like, exactly, you are in the optimal time right now to really plug into your community, plug into your networks, organize the people around you. Really, like, let's get something started, because obviously the state isn't going to be here to help us. This state is capitalist. It's out to get us. Like,
That's
nah,
right.
like, we need to be here for community, for people. So, like, for example, I know right now, like, there's a Bayanihan network, which is a Filipino mutual aid network that is happening right now in LA region, where folks can, like, Google Bayanihan, sign up via the Google forms for what are you able to do? Like, can you drive? Can you store food? Can you do this and that? Like, that's hella organized. Like, fuck, I'm gonna plug in that shit, because, like, this is how I can be of direct support to people. And this is how we build from the ground up to be able to sustain ourselves long term. Because, like I said, like, it's not like this capitalist state is going to do it for us, right?
And we see the priority. They're giving billions of dollars to banks. There's nurses who are literally telling people, like, we have to choose who gets to live or die because we don't have enough breathing machines, like ventilators.
They're dying too.
Exactly. And the fact that this crisis is exasperated because of the healthcare system that we've been seeing the debate going on for years, different presidencies. Healthcare is a human right. We should have access to healthcare. And look, this is like the prime example of why.
Universal healthcare.
Exactly.
That's
Universal
right.
healthcare, where it doesn't matter where you come from, what your status is, if you have pre-existing conditions.
If you're employed.
Because now we see, like, those are the folks that are most vulnerable. And then they're worried about, like, oh, what if you're going to carry the disease and spread it around? Then why don't you invest in hospitals and healthcare centers that can address these things? Why isn't everyone getting tested?
Yeah,
and there's a lot of people
Yeah.
supporting policing on the street. They're like, oh, you know, they should police people on the street so they are not walking around. I
Yeah.
think we need to be really careful to don't carry that narrative of confinement and policing,
Yeah.
because this is not the
Yeah.
solution. And I've been hearing that from folks who, I'm like, I know it's difficult for you. I know you're going through a hard time, but policing, confinement, the means of coercion are not the solution. They've been part of the problem for a long time.
Exactly. But I know I want to move also, because I just saw that you were wearing one of your shirts, and I want to definitely give space to supporting your business. It says "men" is short for mensos and mentirosos, was actually one of my favorite stickers that I have from you. So why don't we start transitioning and talk a little bit about, like, the inspiration behind your merch, the different messages that you have, and the importance within the spaces that you work in to have that type of messaging.
Okay, so Gata Salvaje merch, like y'all mentioned, queer, angry, feminist merchandise. I hand silkscreen or hand make everything, literally everything, from the stickers to the buttons to the merchandise. The only things that I outsource really are the beanies, the magnets, and the mirror backs, and that's why those I've been having issues restocking. But everything else that are shirts, bodysuits, like, people have asked me, like, oh, where do you get your stickers done? I'm like, me. Like, okay, you know, because with the silk screening, I get, like, high quality vinyl paper, I cut it up, and then I put it under the silk screen, and then I hand cut it. And so that's that, right? So a lot of the themes within my merchandise is very much challenging status quo, and very much like intentions with words, right? I think people get triggered by different words, right? You know, like, if I just go anywhere and I don't know where the fuck I'm at and I say men are trash, people look at me weird, right? But when I say, okay, well, bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks, okay,
Right.
that's the song we're gonna, like, hey, what's my favorite word? Bitch. Okay, cool. But I say men are trash and it's like, hold on, the disrespect. And so it's really meant to, like, I think my merch very much challenges these normative ways that we think of, and really kind of challenge those thoughts, right? When people see there are people, it's so weird. They see men are trash and get it, and then they see landlords are trash and they're like, wait, hold on, not all landlords. And I'm like, again, we are closer to being houseless than being millionaires. Okay, you a peasant too. So it's another theme that I have is like queer until proven straight, right? Like I believe everyone is queer until they come out as straight, right? So these are very much the themes of like just putting everything on its head very much. I'm doing actually a fundraiser talking about mutual support. So elected officials are trash. I'm going to be printing those shirts this Friday, but I'll be putting the pre-order out tomorrow. So we are going to fundraise a goal of $500. I put a Google Doc out to the Church of Men Are Trash. I was like, yo, let's fundraise. Who should this go to? And overwhelmingly, a lot of members from the Church of Men Are Trash said, hey, we should prioritize undocumented folks that don't have socials, that are completely, because there's really nothing going towards them, right? So they're saying, okay, we wanted folks that are undocumented with no social and that they are queer and or a single parent. So we're every month, the goal is every month from the first of the month to the end of the month, we are fundraising, selling shirts, tote bags, and stickers with the goal of donating $500 to somebody within that month. The process would be that someone, folks are going to nominate. You can nominate your friend, you can nominate yourself, whatever. If you fit within the criteria of undocumented with no social, queer and or single parent, I'm sure there's a lot. So we're going to be picking randomly every month, like, okay, this person, it's you. And of course, I want to make this process transparent so people know exactly where their money is going to. So that's starting tomorrow. So for sure, please definitely purchase, and I'll send you all the flyers if y'all don't mind promoting as well.
Yeah, and that's a great example of how you're using your business not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of those in your community. And that's so important, especially when people are thinking like, okay, how can I transition from having to depend on someone for my paycheck to like being like self-sufficient, economically sustainable, but how can I also use my platform? Because you've actually had several platforms. You're on your third Gata Salvaje merch page. And what was the highest number of followers you had before you got deleted?
About now, 3,300, about at the same spot again.
So imagine like every time you're having to like start over, but people, like you're saying, you even have a church of Men Are Trash. Who makes up that church?
Really, anyone. It's very self-identified. Like a friend told me once, like people don't really know they're part of the Church of Men Are Trash until they hear the Church of Men Are Trash.
I'm big on the church.
Right. It's so funny when people are like, oh, I'm like, girl, we go to church together. Like, yo, like, it's funny when people are posting like, oh, it's Gata. I'm like, girl, we go to church together. Like, it's very much the Church of Men Are Trash is anyone who understands intersectionality, like, or approaches liberation through an intersectional lens, right? You understand men are trash, you understand landlords are trash, capitalism is trash, and how all these things are very much go hand in hand. So anyone who identifies with that is a member of the church. That's really.
Also, I want to honor all the emotional labor that you invest in this, because I've been seeing the way that people attack you personally. They say like nasty things to you. I remember even like the day that we met, that shit was crazy, and I'm like, damn. But then I fell in love with you. At that point, I'm like, this girl is laughing like a witch like me. I need to be part of that church. And I remember that we had an experience also because we were tabling the Comadres, and this Chicano man approached to us because
I remember that
because we didn't include white women in the project. And he was going, and I lost my shit, and I went on him, and then I just went to your table, and I'm like,
yes, I remember
had an experience, and she like, oh, every 5 minutes.
That was like,
so I just want to honor that, because I know that keep happening to you. You keep putting your body in front to, stand by the principles that a lot of people live with. So thank you for that. I know it's a lot of emotional labor, and we see you and we honor that because we're in that church.
Exactly.
Oh,
And
yeah,
before people get offended, like, oh my gosh, she's calling me trash. Like I've seen you yourself say like in moments like, oh, I'm being trash right now. Like people get so offended by like, oh, I can't believe she's calling me. And first of all, you have to understand the connotation in which you're using trash. It's like when you don't acknowledge your privilege and you're upholding systems of oppression and violence, that makes you trash. Whether it's within heteronormativity, whether it's male privilege, and the list goes on, right? And so I think that it's really important for people to ask themselves, like, why am I being triggered, right? And like you were saying, but they're not triggered when they see guys violently abusing women.
yep. And that's what I talk about, right? It's like men get so offended being called trash. Imagine being treated worse than trash and being called worse than trash every day. Like, you know, y'all remember in Leimert Park how it was right when the daylight savings happened, where things got darker earlier, and this girl in Leimert Park was screaming, "Somebody help me! Somebody help me!" And it was through the little nest thing. And the next thing you hear is someone just taking off in a car, room, and nobody knows who that was. To this day, I think they don't even know who that person was yet. That could have been any of us. Okay? That is how our society says women are worse than trash. Because we can kidnap them, dispose of them, como si fuera nada.
And I had that experience in downtown when I used to live there. I remember that one day I was wearing my Men Are Trash shirt, and at least 5 men, they're like, they just approached me and like, oh, that shit is not nice. Why are you saying that? I'm not trash. And I just keep ignoring them and walk. The next day, I remember that I went to get like a 6-pack or some shit, alcohol. And in the corner was this man beating this woman in the corner. It was like 5 p.m. 5 people watching, somebody was recording, and I was like, it was a huge man.
Wow.
So I'm like, you know what? Like, let me just go. So I went and I'm like, I started screaming at him, like, you leave her. And it's difficult because you don't want to call the police.
Yeah.
So you need to put your body there.
Yeah.
And then at the moment that I tell him like, I'm recording this, you're going viral right now. He stopped. And then in that point, 2 other people like kind of say like, hey, yeah, that shit is not nice. But then the moment that I realized that a woman was being beaten by a man on the street during the day, and people were just like watching. But then I was just walking, minding my business with my shirt, and get crazy. So that's a perfect example of the shit that it's going on in this world. And I'm like, yeah, please be mad about my shirt because I know that I'm touching something there.
Yeah. And I think it's important to not invest energy in anyone who doesn't get it. If they do not get it and they're being already right off the bat trying to protect men, like, don't even. I say, mira, si te pica, te aplica. And I just keep walking. When they come up to my table, right? When they come up to my table, right? What is this? And I'm like, look, if you don't understand it, it's not for you. And if you're not going to buy anything, keep it moving.
Yeah, because fem labor ain't free. That's another big one of yours. Fem labor ain't free.
That's right.
Not emotional, not physical, not domestic. Even though it's treated, right? People expect women's and fem labor to be free, but it's not, and it shouldn't be. But
aquí estamos.
Aquí estamos. This has been awesome. I'm wondering if my comadres have any more questions for you before we let you go.
Could I say one more thing that I'm remembering that I forgot?
Go for it.
From the tenants' rights stuff. So also Mayor Garcetti said yesterday at 5 p.m., anyone who's under RSO in LA, the city of LA, you're rent controlled, they can't raise the rent till, I guess, the end of the pandemic. I just wanted to make that thing. That's why people think it's a rent freeze, but it's just, you can't increase my rent. Just wanted to put that out there. Sorry. Okay, that's it.
No, you good.
I actually I remembered I had this question because I've been hearing this other argument. Like, what about these small property owners that you know, because I was talking with my boss and she's like, you know, my abuela owns just a little house and she rents the back, and that's literally her only source of income. And I've seen you talk about this. when it comes to small property owners and how sometimes the line does get blurred. So what is your take with that?
I think, you know, it's difficult, right? Because first I see this dynamic, this power dynamic of landlord and tenant, right? If I somehow lose my job or any of that, and I tell the landlord, I'm sorry, I got laid off. Oh, well, I'm sorry, that's not my problem. Here's your 3-day notice. But when we see this happening the other way around, where the landlord is like, oh, well, I don't have money to pay my mortgage, I'm like, you didn't save your money? Like, isn't that what people tell us, to not to save our money, have 3 months rent, not, you know, like shit like that. Like, so like I feel like there's this dynamic there. There are people I know that really do only rely for that only income, that are mom and pop. Maybe they have the back unit rented or whatever. Like, I think the system is also here to hurt them as well, right? But very often these landlords more side with like class, because of classism. Like, landlords band together with other landlords. And it sucks when I see mom and pop like owned apartments or houses or whatever, where these folks really just don't care. They're like, look, this is my only income, you need to pay me right now. And there's no sympathy. I don't know for if like the majority of folks have like mom and pop. Like, everywhere I've been, it's been like, oh, a property manager. So I can't even talk to the landlord personally and say, hey girl, this is my situation. Like, it's a property management that is like, no, this isn't gonna go down.
Right. And they have the money to evict you, because evictions are really expensive. So if they're going through that whole process, like, no sympathy.
And from what I understand as well, like, I don't have all of the information, but I do know a friend who told me like, hey, actually there are protections for landlords, or like they were pretty much saying like landlords are going to be fine. There's an article somewhere, I haven't read it, so I can't
there are
attest to it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I'm sure landlords will be fine. They like, you own, like, I think it's, you have the privilege of owning your own space and also owning another place. There are so many people who can't even say that even have a roof under their heads. Like, I don't know. I think it's just very important to understand this dynamic before we kind of get into, but what about me? I'm a good landlord. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you. Here's a cookie. But what about like, what are you doing as a landlord? Like, for like, hey, we got to talk to other landlords and be like, yo, y'all got to stop with these tiers. Because even with like the bare fucking minimum that the mayor has passed, AGLA, the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, that's like the tenants union, but for like landlords. Like, that's like the landlords tenant union. They were crying. They were like, oh my God, this is going to impact us. Oh my God. I'm like, what are you talking about? You still getting your money. You're just getting it later. Like, what? So same thing with men, right? Who are like, oh, but I'm a good man. I don't beat women. I don't, all this other shit. Like, okay, well, what are you doing to like,
do you stop from beating his girlfriend?
Okay, what do you, so I really think we need to focus on that before it being very personal, and understanding this is more systematic than it is personal.
I agree. That was a great answer. Anything else, comadres, before?
I appreciate having you on this episode. I think it's important that we touched a lot of topics, and I'm glad we did, because it just goes to show just how interwoven everything is. Like, we started with what, like the rent moratorium, right? Like, yeah, and then it just encapsulated so much. So yeah, so thank you for your time and like sitting here with us and talking about it, and just really just dropping them knowledge.
Yeah, gracias, Gata. We love you.
Yes.
Ya sabes.
I love my comadres too.
No, I know you're such a
loves you. I always ask.
Honestly, yeah, damn, she down as fuck, y'all. Fuck.
Yeah, we're down for her too. We love
Please support Gata Salvaje project. It's amazing. We've been working with her for so long, and it's been the best experience. Yeah, Gata, thank you very much. You're about solidarity. You're about radicality. We admire you, and we really, really respect all the labor that you do.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
and when you say mujeres protecting mujeres, you're really about that. So I really I respect that and I appreciate it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
just before we leave, why don't you shout out your handles again and your website so people can go and support all your labor.
Gata Salvaje Merch 3 is my Instagram. Gata Salvaje 415 is my Twitter. And then gatasalvajemerch.com is where all of my information to the rest of my social media and my whole online store is at.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.